The moving truck was already turning onto my street when my mother called me to ask why I wasn't home to let my brother in. I remember standing in my office, looking at the email on my screen, and feeling something inside me go completely still, because the apartment she was talking about wasn't hers. It wasn't my brother's. It wasn't even my family's. It was mine. And by the time that truck reached my building, I had already sold it. My mother just didn't know it yet. My name is Megan Hayes, and for most of my life, I was the person in my family who was expected to handle things quietly. If something needed fixing, I fixed it. If someone needed money, I was supposed to understand. If my mother needed help, I was supposed to drop whatever I was doing. And if my younger brother Tyler made another terrible decision, everyone expected me to somehow make the consequences disappear. I was 34 years old when I finally realized something. My family didn't see me as a daughter or a sister. They saw me as a resource, a reliable one, a patient one, a resource that apparently came with a spare bedroom. The apartment was a two-bedroom condo in a quiet building on the east side of town. I'd bought it 6 years earlier. At the time, everyone told me I was being ridiculous. I had been renting a tiny one-bedroom place and working two jobs while saving every extra dollar I could. I skipped vacations, I drove an old car, I packed lunches, I said no to dinners out. I watched friends my age spend money on things I desperately wanted while I transferred another few $100s into my savings account. When I finally had enough for a down payment, I remember sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at the mortgage calculator. My hands were shaking, not because I was scared, because for the first time in my life, I was looking at something that belonged entirely to me. No one had given it to me. No one had rescued me. No one could threaten to take it away. I had earned it. The day I got the keys, I stood inside that empty living room and cried. There were no curtains, no furniture, just pale walls, hardwood floors, and afternoon sunlight coming through the windows. But I loved it. I loved every inch of it. The small balcony, the narrow kitchen, the second bedroom that eventually became my office. Even the ugly little bathroom cabinet I kept meaning to replace. It wasn't luxurious, it wasn't huge, but it was mine. My mother never really understood that. When I first showed her the condo, she walked around with her arms crossed. "It's nice," she said. I smiled. "Thanks." She looked into the second bedroom. "What are you going to do with this?" "Probably make it an office." She shrugged. "Seems like a waste." That was my mother. Nothing I owned was ever simply mine. Everything was always potentially useful to someone else. The second bedroom could be a guest room. My savings could help Tyler. My weekends could be spent running errands. My career could be put on hold if someone needed something. My time wasn't really my time. My money wasn't really my money. And apparently, eventually, my home wouldn't really be my home either. Tyler was 31. He had been unemployed for almost a year when everything happened. And unemployed wasn't even the worst part. Tyler had a talent for turning every opportunity into an excuse. He'd had jobs. Several. He'd worked in sales, construction, a delivery company, a warehouse, a restaurant. Every job had ended for a different reason. Bad manager, bad hours, bad coworkers, not the right environment. According to Tyler, the world was always failing him. He never seemed to consider the possibility that he was failing himself. My mother defended him relentlessly. He just hasn't found his path. That sentence became something of a family joke. Except I was never laughing. Because every time Tyler didn't have enough money, someone called me. "Megan, could you help him with groceries?" "Megan, Tyler's car needs a repair." "Megan, he needs a little help with his phone bill." "Megan, he's going through a rough patch." A rough patch. It had lasted years. I helped sometimes. More than sometimes. I wish I could say I never enabled him. I did. That's the uncomfortable truth. I gave him money because saying no created arguments. I helped him because I hated watching my mother panic. I told myself I was protecting the family. What I was really doing was teaching them that I could always be counted on to clean up the mess. Then, one Tuesday morning, my phone rang at 8:12. It was Mom. I answered while making coffee. "Hey, good morning, honey." There was something strange in her voice. Too cheerful. That should have been my first warning. "What's up?" "Well, I wanted to tell you something before you heard it from Tyler." I leaned against the counter. "Okay. Your brother is moving." I smiled automatically. "That's great. He's moving in with you." I stopped breathing for a second. I honestly thought I'd misheard her. "What?" "Tyler is moving into your condo." There was no hesitation in her voice, no question, no uncertainty. She said it like she was telling me what time dinner would be. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because my brain couldn't process the sentence. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "He needs somewhere to stay." "He can stay with you." There was a pause. Then her voice changed. "Megan." That one word contained an entire lecture. I knew what was coming. "I don't have room." "You have a whole second bedroom." "That's my office." "You can move your things." "No." The answer came out before I even thought about it. Silence. "What?" "No." My mother inhaled sharply. "You don't have to be difficult." "I'm not being difficult. I'm saying Tyler isn't moving into my apartment." "Your apartment?" The way she repeated it made my stomach tighten. "Yes, my apartment." "You mean the condo?" "Yes." "Which the family helped you get." I stared at the coffee maker. There it was. The rewrite. The family had helped. Except they hadn't. My father had loaned me $3,000 for closing costs, and I had paid every cent back within 6 months. My mother had helped me move a few boxes. That was it. But somehow, over the years, those things had transformed into a collective family investment. "I paid for that condo," I said, "and we're not arguing about that." "We are if you're telling me Tyler is moving in." "He's your brother." "That doesn't make him my tenant." "He won't be a tenant." "Exactly. He'll be family." I closed my eyes. "Mom, listen to yourself." "Why are you making this so difficult?" "I'm not." "He's struggling." "I know." "He has nowhere to go." "He can rent a room." "With what money?" "That's not my responsibility." Another silence. This one was colder. "You've changed." I almost laughed. "No, Mom. I've just started saying no." She hung up. I stood there for several minutes. My coffee was getting cold. My hand was still wrapped around the mug. I remember staring at the steam disappearing and thinking, they weren't asking. They had already decided. That realization hurt more than I expected. Because if my mother had called and said, "Megan, Tyler is desperate. Would you consider letting him stay for a month?" I might have actually considered it. I might have set boundaries. I might have helped. But she didn't ask. She announced. That difference mattered. A lot. I called Tyler. He answered on the fifth ring. "Hey, did Mom tell you you're moving into my condo?" "Yeah." I waited. "Tyler?" "What?" "You can't." He laughed. "Mom said you'd probably freak out." My jaw tightened. She shouldn't have made plans for my home. "Relax." "Don't tell me to relax." "It's temporary." "How temporary?" "I don't know. A few months." "No." "You won't even notice I'm there." "Tyler." "What?" "You're not moving in." His voice hardened. "You really gonna leave me homeless?" "You're not homeless." "I don't have anywhere to go." "You have options." "Like what?" "Get a job." Silence. Then he laughed bitterly. "Wow. What? That's what you've got?" "What do you want me to say?" "I thought you cared about me." That sentence hit exactly where he intended it to. I hated that. I hated how easily guilt could still reach me. I'm not abandoning you, I said quietly. Feels like it. You need to figure out your own housing. Mom already told me I could stay with you. Mom doesn't own my condo. She says family doesn't treat family like this. I looked around my kitchen, the refrigerator, the counters, the little magnet I'd bought on a trip 3 years earlier. Every ordinary thing suddenly felt like evidence. I wasn't being asked to give up a couch. They wanted access to the one thing I had built entirely for myself, and they expected me to feel guilty for protecting it. Tyler, I said, do not bring your stuff to my building. He hung up. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. That evening, my mother sent me a text. You need to stop punishing your brother. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, he's your family. Still nothing. Then, he'll be there Friday. I stared at those 3 words. Friday. Not, we're hoping. Not, can we talk? Friday. I put my phone face down. That night, I barely slept. I kept waking up and checking the clock. 2:14, 3:47, 5:02. Every time I woke up, the same thought was waiting for me. What if they actually do it? At 6 in the morning, I got out of bed. I walked through the apartment. The hallway was dark. The second bedroom door was half open. My desk sat against the wall. My monitor, my books, my filing cabinet. Years of my work. I stood there looking at it, and something clicked. I had spent my whole life trying to convince my family to respect boundaries. Maybe that was the mistake. Maybe boundaries weren't something you explained. Maybe they were something you enforced. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. Then I started researching what selling my condo would actually involve. At first, I wasn't serious. I told myself I was just looking. But by 9:30 that morning, I had contacted a real estate attorney. By lunchtime, I had requested a property valuation, and by Thursday afternoon, I had received an offer. Not an insultingly low offer, a serious one, from a private investor who wanted the condo as a rental property. The number on the screen made my heart pound. I read it 3 times. Then I looked at my phone. 6 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Tyler, 1 text. The moving truck is coming Friday morning. Please don't make this ugly. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I looked back at the offer. And for the first time since this started, I smiled. Not because I wanted to hurt them, because I finally understood something. They had mistaken my silence for permission. They had mistaken my patience for weakness. And they had made one enormous mistake. They had given me time to think. By Thursday night, I had signed the paperwork. The sale was moving fast because the buyer was paying cash. I had no mortgage complications, no chain, no contingency, just signatures, documents, a closing appointment. And one very important detail. The new owner had no relationship with my family. He owed them nothing. Neither did I, but I still hadn't told them. And that was where everything got interesting. Friday morning arrived with gray skies and a cold wind pushing leaves across the parking lot. I had barely slept. But unlike the previous nights, I wasn't anxious. I was calm. Almost unnaturally calm. The sale had been finalized that morning. The money was sitting in my account. The keys were ready to be transferred. And legally, the condo was no longer mine. I had spent the last several hours moving the few personal things I still had there. Most of my belongings were already packed. The place looked strange, bare, almost unfamiliar. But I didn't feel sad. That surprised me. For years, I had thought the condo represented security. Now I realized it represented something else, a target, something my family had spent years quietly convincing themselves they had a claim to. So, I had removed the target. At 8:15, my mother called. I didn't answer. At 8:21, she called again. Still nothing. At 8:37, Tyler texted, "We're leaving soon." I stared at it. I typed, "Don't come here." Then deleted it. I typed, "The situation has changed." Deleted that too. Finally, I put the phone down. There was no reason to explain. They hadn't asked permission. They had announced their plans. So I decided they could discover reality the same way they had tried to impose their plans on me. When the truck arrived. At 9:04, my mother called again. This time, I answered. "Hello? Megan, where are you?" "At work." "Well, you need to come home." "Why?" "The movers are here." I almost smiled. "Okay." There was a pause. "What do you mean, okay?" "I mean, okay. Tyler has everything loaded." "That's unfortunate." Her voice became sharp. "Don't start." "I'm not starting anything." "You knew this was happening." "Yes." "So why aren't you home?" "Because I don't need to be." "What?" I looked out the office window. Cars moved through the intersection below. People were going to work, buying coffee, living normal lives. My life was about to become something else. "Mom," I said quietly, "you should talk to the new owner." Silence. "What new owner?" I didn't answer immediately. Then I heard her breathing change. "What did you do?" "I sold the condo." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the faint hum of my office air conditioner. "You what?" "I sold it." "You can't have." "I did." "To who?" "A private investor." "You're lying." "No." "Megan." Her voice cracked. "You wouldn't do that." "I already did." "But Tyler is moving in." "I know." "You knew we were coming." "Yes." "You sold it anyway?" I leaned back in my chair. "Yes." She started yelling. I didn't. She accused me of humiliating the family. I listened. She called me selfish. I listened. She said I had betrayed my brother. I listened. Then she said the sentence that made me realize I had made the right decision. "You knew we had already hired the movers." I closed my eyes. "Yes." "So you let us waste all that money?" "No." "You did." "No, Mom. You wasted that money." "How dare you?" "You never asked me." "Because family shouldn't have to ask." I looked at my desk. That sentence stayed with me. Family shouldn't have to ask. That was the belief underneath everything. It explained the money, the favors, the guilt, the entitlement. They didn't believe family meant people who loved each other. They believed family meant people who automatically had access to one another's lives. "My home isn't a family resource," I said. "You've become cruel." "Maybe." "Tyler has nowhere to go. He can stay with you." "You know I can't." "Then he needs to find somewhere else." She hung up. I sat there for a moment. My hands were trembling, not from fear, adrenaline. I hadn't expected the conversation to feel so intense. I'd imagined this moment for hours. I'd imagined anger, screaming, maybe even satisfaction. But the reality was quieter. It felt like stepping off a bridge and discovering there was ground underneath you. I had been afraid of saying no for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to survive saying it. Then my phone rang again. "Unknown number." I answered. "Hello?" A man's voice said, "Hi, is this Megan Hayes?" "Yes." "I'm David Carter. I'm the buyer." I straightened. "Hi. Sorry to bother you. I think there's a situation at the property." My stomach tightened. "What's happening?" "There's a moving truck outside." I closed my eyes. "Of course," David continued. "There are several people here. A woman is insisting the condo belongs to her daughter and that her son is moving in." I almost laughed. "I'm sorry. Are they supposed to be here?" "No." "Okay." He paused. "I told them that, but they're not leaving." I felt a strange calm settle over me. "Call the police." David was quiet. "You sure?" "Absolutely." "Okay." I heard someone in the background yelling. Then David said, I'm going to do that now. The call ended. I sat there staring at my phone. For the first time, the consequences of what I'd done were no longer theoretical. My mother was standing outside a property she had believed belonged to me. My brother was standing beside a moving truck full of his belongings. And a stranger, the legal owner, was calling the police because they refused to leave. I felt a knot forming in my chest. Not guilt. Something more complicated. Sadness. Because beneath all the anger was the realization that my family had taken themselves to a place where this was the only way things could end. I hadn't called the police. I hadn't confronted them. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't threatened anyone. I had simply removed myself from the situation. And now the boundaries I had tried to explain for years were being enforced by someone who had no emotional connection to them. That was when I realized how little power guilt had, when the person standing across from you didn't care about your family's history. David didn't know Tyler. He didn't know my mother. He didn't know how many times I'd been told to sacrifice my comfort for them. He knew one thing: they were trespassing on his property. Nothing more. And that made their excuses useless. While my mother was arguing with the police outside my old condo, I was sitting in a quiet office across town, watching the final paperwork process. The strangest part? I wasn't thinking about Tyler. I was thinking about myself. About the woman I'd been 6 months earlier. The woman who would have panicked, who would have called Mom 10 times, who would have begged everyone to calm down, who would have offered a compromise. Maybe Tyler could stay for a month. Maybe 2. Maybe I could sleep on the couch while he took the bedroom. Maybe I could move my office. Maybe I could pay some of his bills. Maybe, maybe, maybe. That word had controlled my life. Maybe if I helped enough, they'd appreciate me. Maybe if I gave enough, they'd respect me. Maybe if I stayed quiet, they'd stop asking. But there was another possibility. Maybe they would never stop. Maybe the only reason they kept taking was because I kept handing things over. So I stopped. The sale itself had been surprisingly straightforward. The buyer had originally contacted me through the attorney. He was an investor named David Carter. He didn't know my family. He didn't care why I was selling. He cared about the property's location and numbers. That was exactly what I needed. A transaction without emotion. During the final walkthrough, I had stood in the living room one last time. Sunlight poured through the windows. I ran my fingers over the wall. There was a small mark near the doorway from when I had moved my desk in. I remembered standing there 6 years earlier with a cardboard box in my arms. I'd been so proud. I had thought that condo would be my forever home, but forever isn't always about staying somewhere. Sometimes it's about knowing when to leave. David asked me if I was okay. I said yes. He nodded. Then we signed. When the transfer completed, I felt something release inside me. Not happiness, relief. Deep, physical relief. Like I'd been holding my breath for years. Then the phone rang. Mom. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was shaking. You need to call me right now. I didn't. Another voicemail. You have humiliated your brother. Another. He's crying. I stared at the screen. Then another. You have ruined this family. That one almost made me laugh, because apparently a family could survive years of unemployment, financial chaos, manipulation, and entitlement, but not a daughter selling her own property. I turned the phone over. Then I went home. Not to the condo, to a small rental apartment I had already arranged for myself. It was temporary. Smaller. Less impressive. But it was mine. And no one had a key. That first night, I ordered takeout and sat on the floor because my furniture hadn't arrived yet. I ate noodles from a plastic container while sitting against the wall. And I felt free. Completely free. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Tyler. You didn't have to do this. I stared at the message. Then another appeared. Mom says you're paying for our moving costs. I actually laughed. I typed, no. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, you're unbelievable. I didn't respond. A few minutes later, I hope you're happy. That one hurt. Because for a tiny second, the old Megan appeared. The part of me that wanted to explain. I wanted to say, I didn't do this because I hate you. I did it because you assumed my life was yours. I wanted to say, I helped you so many times. I wanted to say, I would have helped again if you'd asked. But then I remembered the sentence. He's moving in Friday. Not, can he stay? Not, would you consider it? He was moving in. There had been no room for my answer. So I put the phone down. That weekend, the family group chat exploded. My aunt called me selfish. My cousin said I should have given Tyler a chance. Someone wrote that material possessions aren't more important than family. I read that one twice. Then I deleted the chat. Because it was easy for people to demand sacrifice when they weren't the ones sacrificing. No one offered Tyler their home. No one offered him their bedroom. No one offered to pay his rent. Everyone simply wanted me to give up mine. And suddenly I saw the pattern clearly. They weren't asking for family. They were asking for access. There was a difference. On Monday morning, I went to work. For the first time in days, I didn't check my phone every 5 minutes. I drank coffee, answered emails, went through meetings. At lunch, my mother appeared outside my office. I knew she was there before she walked in. She had a way of making the entire atmosphere change. She stood in the doorway. Her eyes were red. You really did it. I looked at her. Yes. You sold the apartment. Yes. Just like that. It took paperwork. She didn't appreciate the joke. You embarrassed me. I wasn't trying to. You let a stranger throw us out. I didn't throw you out. You knew he'd call the police. I knew you were trespassing. She stared at me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said something I had never expected. Where is Tyler supposed to live? I don't know. He's staying with me. I nodded. Okay. She looked almost surprised. You're not going to apologize? No. Why? I thought about it. Because the answer was complicated. I was wrong about something. What? I thought if I explained myself enough, you'd understand. She frowned. But you don't understand. No, I said. You don't. Her face hardened. I raised you. I know. I sacrificed for you. I know. And this is how you repay me? I felt my throat tighten. There it was. The ledger. The invisible account where every parental sacrifice became a debt I was expected to repay forever. I appreciate what you've done for me, I said. Then act like it. Appreciation isn't ownership. She went quiet. I continued. You raised me. You loved me. You helped me. I'm grateful. But none of that gives you the right to decide what happens to my property. She shook her head. You've become cold. Maybe I had to. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, Tyler will never forgive you. I felt the words land. For years, that threat would have destroyed me. This time, it didn't. That's his choice. She left. I sat there staring at the door. My hands were cold. My heart was beating too fast. I thought I would feel victorious. Instead, I felt grief. Because setting boundaries doesn't always feel powerful. Sometimes it feels like mourning the family you thought you had. But I didn't take back what I'd done, and that mattered. Over the next few weeks, things got worse before they got better. Tyler struggled to find work. Mom blamed me. She told relatives that I had sold the apartment out from under him. That phrase became a favorite. Out from under him. As though he'd owned it. As though he'd been a tenant. As though I had evicted him. People believed her. Some didn't. One cousin privately messaged me and asked what had really happened. I sent screenshots. Not angry ones, not dramatic ones. Just the messages. He's moving Friday. Mom says family doesn't have to ask. You need to stop punishing your brother. The moving truck is coming. Then I sent the sale confirmation. My cousin replied, "Oh, just that. Oh." Sometimes one word is enough. Then something unexpected happened. David contacted me. He said there had been a small issue with the previous occupants. I laughed when he said it. Previous occupants? He said, "Your family." I told him I was sorry. He said, "Don't be, I've dealt with worse." Then he paused. "Actually, I wanted to tell you something." "What?" "Your brother left a box behind." I frowned. "What kind of box?" "Personal stuff." I almost told him to throw it away. Then I changed my mind. "Can you send it to me?" A week later, the box arrived. Inside were some old photos, a jacket, a few papers, and one thing that surprised me, a photograph of me and Tyler when we were children. We were standing beside our parents. Tyler was holding a baseball. I was wearing a yellow dress. We were both smiling. I sat on the floor looking at that picture for a long time. I remembered that version of us. Before money, before jobs, before resentment, before everyone decided I was responsible for him. And for the first time, I understood that my revenge wasn't really about Tyler. It wasn't even about Mom. It was about ending the role they had assigned me. The family rescuer. The reliable daughter. The backup plan. I didn't need to destroy them. I just needed to stop being available for destruction. That was the real turning point. 3 months after I sold the condo, something happened that I never expected. Tyler got a job, a real one, full-time, benefits. He called me. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then he said, "I got a job." I smiled despite myself. "That's good." "Yeah." Another pause. "Mom thinks you should help me get an apartment." I closed my eyes. Of course she did. I laughed softly. "Tyler." "What?" "You have a job now." "Yeah." "So you can rent one." Silence. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. "Yeah." For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then he said, "I was really angry at you." "I know." "I thought you were trying to screw me over." "I wasn't." "I know that now." That meant more than I expected. He continued, "I've been thinking about it." "About what?" "What you said." I waited. "Mom told me I could move into your place like it was already decided." "Yeah." I guess I never thought about how crazy that was. I looked down at my hands. "Tyler, I would have helped you if you'd asked." "I know." "But you didn't." "I know." There was something fragile in his voice. I was embarrassed. That stopped me. He had never said that before. I didn't want to admit I couldn't get my life together. I swallowed. "Tyler, I know I made excuses." I didn't interrupt. "I know I expected everyone to rescue me." He laughed quietly. "I guess I thought you'd always be there." I looked out the window. "I thought so too." "What?" "I thought I'd always be the one fixing everything." He was quiet. Then he said, "I'm sorry." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Thank you." We talked for another 15 minutes. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. No music. No tears. No perfect ending. Just two adults finally having a conversation without our mother standing between us. That was enough. Mom took longer. She didn't apologize. Not immediately. For months, she maintained that I had overreacted. Then, almost a year later, I received a letter. A real letter. Not a text. Not a voicemail. A letter. She wrote that she had been angry. She wrote that she had believed family meant sharing everything. She admitted she had made decisions for me because she thought she knew what was best. And then she wrote something that surprised me. "I didn't realize how much I had come to depend on you." I read that sentence several times. That was the closest she had ever come to admitting what happened. I didn't immediately respond. I let the letter sit on my kitchen table for 3 days. Then I wrote back. I told her I loved her. I told her I was grateful for many things, but I also told her that our relationship could only continue if my boundaries were respected. She replied 2 weeks later. Okay, just one word. But this time, it was enough. I never moved back into the condo. I didn't regret selling it. The money from the sale gave me something more valuable than property. It gave me freedom. I paid off the remaining debt connected to the condo. I invested some, I kept some, and I used part of it to put a down payment on a smaller townhouse the following year. This time, I didn't tell my family until after the keys were in my hand. When Mom visited, she walked through the rooms quietly. Then she looked at me. It's beautiful. I smiled. Thank you. She looked toward the spare room. What are you going to do with that? I raised an eyebrow. She smiled. Sorry? We both laughed. It was a small moment, but it meant something. Because the room was mine. The house was mine. My life was mine. And no one was announcing who would move into it. There was one final piece of the story I didn't expect. About 18 months after the moving truck incident, I ran into David at a coffee shop. He recognized me immediately. Hey, Megan. I smiled. David. We talked for a few minutes. He told me the condo was doing well as a rental. I asked if the tenants were happy. Very. Then he smiled. You know, I've bought a lot of properties. Yeah? Yours was memorable. I laughed. Because of my family? Definitely. He shook his head. I've never seen someone arrive with a moving truck before they had legal permission to move into a property. I laughed. I wish I could say it was funny at the time. He nodded. Probably wasn't. No. Then he said something I'll never forget. You made the right call. I looked at him. I wasn't sure at first. He shrugged. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't getting revenge. He paused. It's accepting that you don't owe people access to your life just because you love them. I thought about that for a long time, because that's what the entire experience had taught me. Revenge is a word people misunderstand. They think revenge always means destruction, embarrassing someone, hurting someone, taking something away. Sometimes it does, but sometimes revenge is simply refusing to play the role someone assigned you. My mother expected me to surrender my home. I didn't. My brother expected me to rescue him. I didn't. My relatives expected me to feel ashamed. I didn't. And the person who ultimately lost the most wasn't Tyler. It wasn't Mom. It was the version of me who had spent years believing that being a good daughter meant abandoning herself. That version of me had finally disappeared. And honestly, I didn't miss her. Looking back, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if my mother had simply asked. Maybe Tyler could have stayed for a few weeks. Maybe I would have helped him find work. Maybe we could have handled the situation like a family. I'll never know. Because she didn't ask. She decided. And that decision changed everything. The moving truck was supposed to be the moment my brother took over my home. Instead, it became the moment I took back control of my life. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't humiliate my family publicly. I simply made one decision they couldn't override. I sold what belonged to me, and when they arrived expecting access, reality met them at the front door. A locked door, a new owner, and eventually, the police. The most satisfying part wasn't watching my mother panic. It wasn't knowing Tyler had nowhere to put his furniture. It wasn't even seeing the look on my mother's face when she realized the property was gone. The satisfying part came later, when I woke up one morning in my new home and realized I could finally make decisions without wondering how my family would react. I could buy furniture because I liked it. I could invite people over because I wanted to. I could leave town for a weekend without explaining myself. I could say no without writing a 10-paragraph justification afterward. I could love my family without surrendering myself to them. And that was the real victory. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's becoming someone they can no longer control. If you've ever had a family member assume your kindness meant unlimited access to your life, then you already understand what Megan learned the hard way. Being family does not give someone ownership of you. Love can survive boundaries. Real relationships can survive a no. And if someone only loves you when you're useful to them, losing their approval may actually be the beginning of finding your freedom. If this story kept you listening, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more satisfying revenge stories, and tell me in the comments, would you have sold the apartment too? Or would you have handled Tyler differently? Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't taking something from someone. It's finally refusing to give them something they never had the right to take.